Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Eagles podcast. I'm Zach Berman here in studio with Rich Hoffman, as I said the other day, the most versatile member of the PHLY staff, author of the outstanding newsletter Each Morning. Can talk Sixers and can talk Eagles and many other things. But today, Rich, we're talking Eagles. Pumped for that?
I'm pumped, Zach. Let's have a good show.
And we're going to start off, we have a lot to discuss in this show. Like you saw in the headline, we're going to discuss Pro Bowl because the events actually begin today. The Eagles have 7 players down there, and we'll have some fun with that topic. We'll have some Super Bowl talk in there as well, looking at last year's team and how it compares to the 2 teams playing next weekend. But let's start with some news because actually, as we were going over the show, some news broke, and that is down in Washington, the final head coaching seat is filled. Dan Quinn goes over from the Dallas Cowboys to become the Washington Commanders head coach. All seats are now filled, but this is one that sends ripples throughout the NFC East because obviously Washington, now you know who their coach is, and Dallas loses a key piece of their staff. What was your reaction when that went down?
Well, my first question, Zach, was do you think Dan Quinn turns the backwards hat front facing now? I mean, this is a position.
You sound like Colin Cowherd right now.
I know, with the Baker Mayfield stuff. But this is a position of power. Like, is he going to get serious here, or does he ditch the hat entirely? I don't know. My biggest take right away was the Washington job as coveted maybe as we thought it was? Because I think as somebody who's covered the Sixers for a long time, Josh Harris, not a perfect owner, but obviously a huge step forward from what they have had for the past few decades, can kind of have like a modern infrastructure. I think somebody who, I don't think Eagles fans should be thrilled that they ended up being the ones who bought the Commanders. And I also thought, okay, you have this new staff. You have a new GM from the 49ers. Seems like a pretty well thought of guy, right? And you have the number 2 pick in the draft.
Yep. And cap space.
Yeah. So when you put all those things together, I thought, okay, that's going to be like a place that head coaches want to go. Ben Johnson, seems like he said no. Mike McDonald, seems like he said no as well. And I guess I'm just a little bit surprised. Now, I know Ben Johnson had rumors about he has like a super high asking price, but those guys, I think, both passed on this job, and I'm a little bit surprised by that.
Yeah, I think it's a very desirable job for the factors that you mentioned. The number 2 pick, and in addition to that, 2 second-round picks. A lot of cap space, and I understand Bo will tell you. And by the way, he's coming back from the Senior Bowl. He's gonna be back in studio tomorrow, and you can check out the show that he did with Fran Duffy yesterday. That's on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. But Bo would tell you that cap space can be overrated, and I get that, but it's still from a ground zero perspective of putting a team together that is appealing to have, $70+ million in cap space, to have those draft picks. And so, and like you said, new owner, a fan base that wants, that it's not like you're following a storied head coach or anything like that. I think in that situation, Ben Johnson was the target, and they were kind of left scrambling after Ben Johnson decides to stay. Perhaps they act sooner if they knew Ben Johnson was going to stay. The Mike McDonald thing, I think Seattle and him were pretty far down the line there. Obviously, he flew out to Seattle after the second interview. That's a job that makes a lot of sense there. But or a fit that makes a lot of sense. I don't think the wait time is an indication of the way the job is viewed as much as Ben Johnson backing out or not pursuing it. Now, you know this better than me. Josh Harris's history with his first head coaching hire.
This is not what it usually goes like.
With with Brett Brown, they waited until like August to hire Brett Brown. Now, I know there were rumors even on draft night.
People were furious about that too. How can you not have a head coach? It's July.
Exactly. And that seemed to be more Sam Hinkie led than anything else back then,
for sure.
like being deliberate. But the confined timetable that the NFL teams put on it, it's somewhat arbitrary, right? Like, you don't have to hire a coach within 3 weeks. Now you want to put a staff together. And that's what's going to be interesting here with Dan Quinn, is who he hires as his offensive coordinator. As you mentioned in your newsletter, these rumors of Chip Kelly as a package deal with Dan Quinn. I don't know if that's going to come to place. I heard Clint Kubiak's name out there as well. But just from a thought exercise perspective, imagine Dan Quinn and Chip Kelly together. That would be pretty intriguing.
Well, especially because it doesn't seem like Chip really wants to play in the Big Ten with UCLA, which is probably like does not have the resources. I mean, I see all the pictures of the Rose Bowl on most Saturdays. It's not what the Rose Bowl looks like on January 1st or whenever they have the actual game. It doesn't seem like he's a guy who wants to continuously fly across the country to Ann Arbor, to Columbus, even to State College and get his ass kicked. That doesn't seem like something Chip would like. What has Chip been up to? Like, has he been good at UCLA? I don't really pay attention.
He's been fine. He hasn't hit the expectations that they had for him. It hasn't been egregious enough where they say it's so clear to move on from him. And when you're in that no man's land, that might be worse. Like 2 years ago, he had a good year. This past year, they were down. Then they kind of went on a late season charge, if you will. But he certainly hasn't been what they expected when they hired him. And interestingly, they kind of have like this run oriented offense. It's not spreading the field like they did at Oregon.
Does he still have like 8 plays, 9 plays?
Actually, the issue for him in the past, I mean, it was a little different this year, was their defensive coordinator situation. And he had Jerry Ezenaro there for a while. Then Bill McGovern, the late Bill McGovern, was there. This past year, he had Lynn, who was a good D coordinator, and then USC scoops him up. But regardless whether it's Chip Kelly or not,
would they keep Bieniemy, do you think?
Maybe. Now, Bieniemy's still under contract, and so that could be a possibility. Now, he might be disappointed that he got passed over for the head coaching job, but that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I don't know what Dan Quinn's background is with Bieniemy. I don't know what they're saying in the interviews there, but the offensive coordinator role is critical there, because the most success Dan Quinn had in Atlanta was when Kyle Shanahan was there. And I thought Dan Quinn was a good head coach with the Falcons. That certainly Washington would take that type of result. But with his background, the offensive coordinator is critical.
I think his first game was against Chip Kelly, right? Monday Night Football?
Dan Quinn's first game?
Yeah, was that his first game?
No, that was the first game after. Well, that was the Eagles' first game after this. Actually, no. Come to think of it, you are correct.
Yeah.
I apologize. You are correct. I was thinking of the Thursday night opener, Eagles-Falcons, after the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. Yeah, no, the first game down there, absolutely. Byron Maxwell gets beat by Julio Jones.
Oh, no.
I remember that game well.
That's a bad name from the past.
That was the 2015 Eagles.
After watching that preseason game number 3 in Green Bay, where they scored, I think, 21 points in the first quarter, I was like, oh, man.
You're all in on Sam Bradford.
This is a Super Bowl team. Sammy Sleeves, he's the guy. And that went, I think it took about 2 quarters in Atlanta, and it was like, oh, yeah, maybe the preseason doesn't matter quite as much.
No. Now, Kiko had a great interception in that game, Kiko Alonso.
Yes. Good memories.
But
wait, real quick, though. It did feel like, I think the point you made is right, though. It felt like Ben Johnson was such a Josh Harris, even an Adam Peters type of hire, right? I mean, San Francisco brings Kyle Shanahan over, get the new kind of cutting-edge offensive play caller, and to go to Dan Quinn, it just seems like, I don't know, was he their second choice, their third choice? But it does seem, and you're right, Dan Quinn was not a bad coach in Atlanta for a lot of his time there, but it just doesn't fit what I thought was going to happen there.
No, certainly you would expect offense, right? I thought they were going to go there. And frankly, I'm surprised that they did not talk to Vrabel. I thought Vrabel, I think Vrabel's a really good head coach who would make a lot of sense coming off that Titans job. But early in the search, their priority was getting the GM. right? And so they get Adam Peters. That was their top target, and it really seemed like Peters and Ben Johnson would be this package deal. So whatever happened, whether it was the initial interview, whether it was the asking price, whether it was Ben Johnson, as he said, he does not want to mess with Happy, right? He has unfinished business with the Lions. I think that sent them rerouting their search thereafter.
Speaking of Ben Johnson, do you recall coordinators basically turning down the position to be a head coach, probably in multiple places, if we're being honest, considering how well thought of that guy is and how well thought of he has been for 2 years now? It feels pretty rare for that to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. I mean, if I want to stretch your memory here and the audience's memory, Gary Kubiak, when he was with the Broncos, was known to be especially selective, right? I think the expansion Browns at one point were interested in getting Kubiak, and he was kind of waiting for the right opportunity, and he goes to the Texans for his first job. And there have been a few other situations where the coordinator was particularly selective, but...
2 Kubiak mentions in the first 10 minutes of the show.
But I'm turning this into the Daryl Morey reference, but opportunity is not a lengthy visitor. Like, you don't know. There's only 32 jobs, and you don't. I keep hearing he's going to be a hot candidate next year. You never know what could happen.
Totally.
Right? So.
What if they have a bunch of injuries next year and what if they have the Eagles season? And it might not even be completely his fault. Yeah. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that.
Well, and then real quick with Dan Quinn, this messes up the Cowboys quite a bit.
I think he was a really good defensive coordinator for them. And, we mentioned it the other day. Like, I kind of compared him to Kellen Moore as he was like the defensive coordinator version. Like, he gave the Eagles trouble. It wasn't every time, but, it feels like those defenses forced a ton of turnovers. It seemed like the guys played really hard for him. So the idea that he is now kind of leaving Dallas, I'm not sure how well he'll do as a head coach in Washington, but I know he did a pretty good job, at least in the regular season, as a defensive coordinator for Dallas. And as an Eagles fan, that's a big deal, right? To put an unknown in there. And also for Dallas, like, is it Al Harris? Because, like, I feel like a lot of the defensive coordinator options probably are off the board, right? This is kind of like the Eagles last year where, we're into February now, and they have a position to fill. So we'll see what they do. I mean, obviously, Al Harris is pretty well thought of there, but...
Yeah, Jerry Jones said the other day that they're in win-now mode, which I made the joke to Bo. It seems like they're always in win-now mode. So it makes you wonder, are they going for more of an established defensive coordinator? But certainly from the 2024 Eagles perspective, this is probably a good outcome because it takes Washington some time. Dan Quinn's not like the top choice, right? And then the flip side is Dallas is particularly weakened here, or potentially weakened. You don't know what the replacement's going to do, and so that does shake things up from the NFC East. And speaking of the 2024 Eagles, and kind of to give the behind the scenes of the show, we were debating what to say or how much to kind of get into A.J. Brown here, right? Because on one hand, you don't want to be oblivious to what the fan base is talking to. On the other hand, you don't want to kind of throw oxygen into something that probably doesn't have a lot of merit. So based on my understanding, there's a WIP poll the other day. Would you trade A.J. Brown for Patrick Surtain? Then that took on a life of its own in terms of A.J. Brown potentially being traded. I can tell you, I'd be utterly shocked if there was even a thought of A.J. Brown being traded. A.J. Brown was the best player on the Eagles last year, is one of the elite players in the NFL, is on a trajectory to be a Hall of Famer. That's not hyperbole. Look at the statistical trajectory through the first 5 years of his career. Number one. Number two, from a financial perspective, it would be imprudent, to say it generously. It would be foolish, like realistically, to trade A.J. Brown. And the third part is like it doesn't make them better. A.J. He's respected. He's liked. So I didn't want to throw oxygen into it, but at the same time, I don't want it to seem like we're ignoring what's kind of being discussed here. He made rounds yesterday promoting something, and he got asked about trade rumors. So the fact that it's being talked about means we can't ignore it. But I'm telling you, and I'm curious your views too. But I'm telling the audience, like, it would utterly shock me. I'm not even saying like if he's traded, it would utterly shock me. If they even have a conversation in that building about like, should we like? No, it's from where I stand, it's not real, and it would be it would shock me. And now I always say never in the NFL, but it would shock me.
Well, it's also how modern media, unfortunately, works, Zach. And I mean, I think there are a lot of good things about the instantaneous, news on Twitter, and just, hey, look, Adam Schefter tweeted out that Dan Quinn was going to be the head coach about half hour before we went on, so that helped us.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you take, whether it's a WIP poll, and by the way, this happens in basketball more than any other sport, just the amount of free agent and garbage kind of nonsense, and then it gets aggregated. Maybe one aggregator puts an eyeball emoji on top of it. They take half of the quote. Andre Iguodala has talked about this a lot, where you take half of the quote and you don't give the full context, and it has a life of its own. The next thing, it's leading Reddit.
Yeah.
And I think AJ Brown in this case, it was like a poll. It was like a hypothetical thing. Like you said, it's impractical and it's not going to happen. But then it gets run with, right? Yeah. And, he gets asked about it. The one thing I will say on the Kay Adams show that he was on, it was like a little bit of an interesting answer.
Yeah.
I think it probably reveals maybe a little bit more about, how AJ feels about, not even the organization, but just having his guard up about trade rumors and things like that. Even if we can admit that it's not going to happen, I did think it was kind of a little bit of a revealing answer. Now, hey, look, maybe he had just a bad day and he got taken off guard a little bit by it, and a very vague idea of trade rumors maybe scares him or whatever. But I thought it was a little bit revealing, his answer, that he just wasn't like, no, I'm not getting traded.
Yeah, now he's been traded before, so probably he's become jaded to the business side of the NFL.
He's been traded already too.
Yeah, so. What's that?
He's been traded already, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to say, like, I'm not, when I say this, I'm not casting aspersions on like content anywhere else, because like part of being a sports fan is throwing trade ideas out there. Yeah. It's more taking something that's hypothetical and then turning it into a rumor. Like that there's a leap to go from a poll and just discussion, because like I don't want to be hypocritical. We're on a show every day, year round. Right, we have all these kinds of talks, right, and so if but there's a difference between reporting something and discussing something on here. But I'm telling you, it would utterly shock me if there's even a conversation in that building about trading AJ Brown. Also in the news, and this is real, is Denard Wilson, the Eagles' former defensive backs coach. It looks like he's going to Tennessee to be their defensive coordinator. To give a little background here, Denard Wilson was a popular assistant with the Eagles. He interviewed for the defensive coordinator job, did not get it, therefore did not stay in Philly, went to Baltimore. Since then, the Eagles are now on their third defensive play caller, and Denard Wilson is finally going to get the opportunity to call his own defense.
As somebody who was in that locker room and, has been there for a while now, I don't mean to call you old, Zach, but...
no, I'm 37.
Yeah. Somebody who has seen many an assistant coach walk through those doors of NovaCare. Did it seem like Denard Wilson at the time was maybe a more popular position coach than usual, or maybe had a little bit, I don't even say influence, but just that his guys would go to bat for him more than maybe the normal position coach? Did you feel that at the time in 2022? Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did feel it, in part because defensive backs are that's a group that can be they're big personalities typically, defensive backs, right? Think of Deion Sanders, right? Think of Darius Slay, and Malcolm Jenkins has a strong personality. So defensive backs are a group where you often need a strong personality to coach them, and he earned their respect. He did a good job developing players. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's another big personality. He really did a good job acclimating C.J. Also, from like an Eagles trajectory perspective, after his first year here, 2021, they gave him defensive passing game coordinator title.
Oh, he got the title.
He got the title, which in essence is their way of saying, like, you're doing a good job. We value you. We're going to give you this pay bump. We're going to give you this title bump. But they didn't hire him as defensive coordinator. And there are people in that locker room who, wanted to see him get that job. So, but it's if it worked out great with Desai and Matt Patricia, then you could say, all right, the Eagles made the right decision. I'm not saying everything would have been good last year had they hired Denard Wilson. I'm saying it did not go well after they bypassed Denard Wilson.
Yeah, it just seems like he and Darius Slay had an unbelievable relationship. Of course, Slay, there were stories written about it. Slay, the first thing when I saw that news last night, I looked at Slay's Twitter and he was already there. Like my guy got the job. So good for Denard Wilson. Yeah, it just didn't feel the same as like when Corey Unlin was the defensive backs coach here. When Corey Unlin's, had some good jobs around the league too. But this idea that Denard Wilson was probably had kind of risen above the stature of your run-of-the-mill defensive backs coach. So, yeah, good role for him. We'll get to call some defensive plays with an offensive coach in Tennessee.
Last one for you. You mentioned it in the newsletter. Mike McDonald got hired by Seattle. Not really Eagles-related news there, but the one Eagles-related thing that I should point out is that Carl Scott, a Seahawks defensive assistant who was reportedly coming to Philly with Clint Hurt, your boy, as you wrote about in the newsletter.
The defensive line coach is defensive line coach.
Yep. It sounds like Carl Scott's actually now going to stay with the Seahawks. That report is, I believe, from Matt Zenitz, and that's notable too because when you keep hearing at this stage of, I've been getting questions from fans like, why aren't the Eagles announcing these guys? They haven't announced Kellen Moore, for instance, and sometimes it's because they're waiting to announce everything at once, and then other times it's because they're still sorting things through, and particularly at the position coach level. A guy might think he's coming, but then someone else comes in. It's a better offer. It's more money. It's better trajectory. So until you're signed, you're not signed.
The funny thing about that report too, because it was accompanied with the picture of Clint Hurt looking like Clint Hurt. Yep. It was basically like Clint Hurt was dragging Carl Scott across the country with him. I am gonna throw you over my shoulder, kind of fireman carry you to Philadelphia, and you're gonna be the defensive backs coach. So I think that was what he was rumored to be, right? The secondary coach. Yeah,
they didn't have the official title, but that had been his background with Seattle, with Alabama, and certainly, like I mentioned, he's someone who has a background with some of the members on the Eagles coaching staff. Now, real quick, as I pull up the ads, would you want Clint Hurt and Dom DeSandro coming off the bus first?
Yes.
Or Jordan Mailata. Who would be your come off the first? Your come off the bus first guy with the Eagles?
I think both of them. I think they should be the first people to walk out of the tunnel before the game. Like Dom and Clint should lead them onto the field, and maybe don't run onto the field. Walk. Even look more intimidating. I thought him and Clint and Dom would be a great pairing together. Clint just looks more like a defensive line coach than I've probably ever seen somebody look like a defensive line coach.
Now, that's the first off the bus. If you want to be the first off the plane in Clearwater for Philly spring training, then you need to sign up for Philly Sports Trips. The PHLY is off to Clearwater with Philly Sports Trips for our very first PHLY spring training takeover. Hang with Philly's legend, Charlie Emanuel. Philly Sports Trips plans the whole experience out, from flights and hotels, the game tickets, and transportation. So that's great. All you have to do is show up and have fun. And speaking of having fun, you can spend St. Patrick's Day on a private yacht with a catered dinner and drinks. That sounds like Bo Wolf music right there. Be on the lookout for more events throughout the year with Philly Sports Trips. Our trip is March 13th to 18th, so don't wait to book. Head to allphly.com/events to learn more and book your trip. Now, don't wait to book that, but if you want to wait to book something, then the place to do that would be with Game Time, because Game Time is a place for last minute tickets, and you can also book ahead of time. Like, I'm going to the Sixers game Sunday, pull up the app, look at the deals, and you can find great deals on Game Time. It's not just the Sixers game this Sunday. It's a big game next Sunday. We all know the game we're talking about. And if you're going to Vegas and you want an extra $100, which you could use on a great steak, which you could use on, doubling down on 11 in blackjack, which you could use on anything you would want to do in Vegas. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with code Vegas100. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And like I said, it's not just for the big game. It's for any game like this Sunday's game, this Sunday Sixers game. If you think Ben Simmons is going to play?
No.
Okay, well, if Ben Simmons played and you wanted to boo him or cheer him or however you feel about Ben Simmons, you can pull up that app and you can get Game Time tickets for Sixers Nets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place for last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time right now. Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off a big game ticket. And if you're not going to that game, use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the Pro Bowl, okay? Everyone, it's the All-Star time of year. I should ask you first, what's your favorite All-Star game?
Well, I think only one of them actually simulates what a normal game is like, and that's the one that doesn't require running that much.
Okay.
That's baseball.
That's baseball. Yeah.
Yeah. All-Star games stink now, man. But I think I think it has to be baseball. I mean, basketball is a complete joke. I can't really say I know too much about the hockey All-Star game. Maybe that one is good, but of the other three, definitely baseball.
Real quick, by the way, there is a correction. I said the Sixers Nets game Sunday. It's actually Saturday. It's my Sunday because I'm heading to Vegas on Sunday, so it's the last day of my weekend. So I'm going there with my kids for a night out with them. So that's why I was thinking Sunday, but it's actually Saturday. So just a correction there. But yeah, back to the Pro Bowl. The Eagles have 7 players there. Okay, A.J. Brown pulled out, so A.J. Brown is not there. But Landon Dickerson, Jalen Hurts, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, Hassan Reddick, Darius Slade, DeAndre Swift. And when Jason Kelce was asked if he's going to play in the Pro Bowl, and this was back when they were cleaning out their lockers, Jason Kelce said, well, he's not quite sure that you actually play, right? There's not like your typical game. It's not your typical game like the last time that he was there, but he's excited to go down to Orlando, and he gets to go to Disney World. He called it Walt Disney World, as Bo would like to point out. You got to get the Walt in there.
Not Roy Disney World.
not Roy Disney World.
Walt Disney World.
And he said as long as his daughter can see Elsa, then they will be happy. So he is down in Orlando. With Dickerson, Hurts is the last-minute addition, as is Slay. They are both replacements. And then Lane Johnson, Hassan Reddick, and DeAndre Swift, like I said. Some of the skill competitions that are today, there's the best catch, there's precision passing, closest to the pin, high stakes, dodgeball, kick-tack-toe, snapshots. And then Sunday it includes Madden head-to-head, gridiron gauntlet, tug of war, move the chains. So yeah, this is not like your Pro Bowl of yore. Will you be watching at all?
No, it actually some of those descriptions though reminded me of. I played a lot of Madden in my life.
Yes.
I don't really play it quite as much anymore. Maybe I should buy it back to see what.
Well, so I'll tell you, when you have a son who kind of gets into video games, all of a sudden now it's like socially acceptable again to play it. So my son is nuts about Madden, and I'm in there and I'm spreading 5 wide, and he's going like he goes to the goal line defense because he probably plays at like rookie mode. And so I spread 5 wide and I do a hot route, and I try to explain to him how you have to read what the other team's doing. So I don't take it easy on him in Madden.
It reminded me of kind of the mid-2000s, like the mini games in Madden. Oh my God, I used to play those.
They brought those back.
Like the running back challenge?
It's called training camp now. They brought those back.
Those were so much
It's
fun.
nothing like actual training camp, but it's like their version of training camp.
And then like the passing, you had to throw the ball
Yep.
through the hoop, or kind of the fake hoop that
Yep.
video games could provide. That's what it reminds me of. No, I won't be watching, but I also understand why the NFL does this, because as I wrote in the newsletter today, Zach, like I just pulled up a clip. I just let's pull up a random year and type it into YouTube. And I typed in the 2002 Pro Bowl. And I watched about 5 minutes of it. Not 5 minutes, 3 minutes. The first play I watched was Jeff Garcia was on the Niners. He goes back to pass. And I get it. They're going at maybe 85% speed, but it's not 30% speed. And he gets planted into the ground by two gigantic defensive tackles. And it made me think, like, I can't believe they ever did this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, this is the one sport where you just can't play an all-star game. I mean, you could if everybody decided to play hard, but why would people decide to play hard? It hurts to play football. And I think going to these kind of mini game formats makes sense, but it's just unbelievable that for so long they played at, what was it called? Aloha Stadium?
Yes, in Hawaii. Yep.
I mean, and in the 2000s,
Which is the carp, the bright, it's like the veteran stadium turf.
It looked like Veteran Stadium, Giant Stadium.
Yep.
It just looked absolutely miserable. And when Jeff Garcia was getting up from that sack, he was like looking around like, why am I here?
Exactly.
This is my reward for playing well this season. that I just had 600 pounds fall on me. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's funny that they did that for so long.
Well, speaking of that, my most vivid Pro Bowl watching memory was the late Sean Taylor. Brian Moorman, I believe it was the punter. Do you remember they had a fake punt, and he's running down the right sideline, and Sean Taylor just decks him. And like I'm not even talking about like a normal hit. I'm like, Sean Taylor made him think that he was like he went from Hawaii back to California, right? It was a hit
him right across the Pacific Ocean.
Exactly. And to your point there, Brian Moorman's probably like, well, I'm a punter. If this happened in a game, it'd be bad. If this happens in the Pro Bowl, right? There was the time when...
Can you imagine like showing up to OTAs and being like, yeah, I can't play. That hit from the Pro Bowl was still, it took its toll on me.
Well,
maybe training camp.
Like this actually didn't happen in the game, but there was the famous incident. I say famous like everyone knows it. Famous for me. Robert Edwards, the running back for the New England Patriots, had a good rookie year. He was out of Georgia. He had a good rookie year. He's down in Hawaii for the Pro Bowl, and he's playing a beach football game. And
that's right.
He gets injured, and it like ruined his career.
Even the beaches are bad in Hawaii, right?
Exactly. But
for your knees, I'm sure they're fun to just surf and hang out on.
Well, yeah. So I was going to ask you. I have a lot of Pro Bowl questions for you, but while we're on that topic, it's been in Hawaii, or it was in Hawaii for a long time. That was the big perk. You go there, you sit at the pool or the beach. You drink. You're having Mai Tais at the beach or the pool, and then. I've covered it in Orlando. I've covered it in Arizona. It's been in Vegas in recent years. It was in Miami for a year. Where would you want to go?
How's the media access, first off?
So it used to be awesome. Now I haven't covered it since they changed the format, but
I care about us.
I feel like I'm giving. I feel like I'm giving away some secrets here. It's the same week as the Senior Bowl, right? Obviously, Bo's down at the Senior Bowl, and the Senior Bowl is kind of like the place where all the media goes this week. If you're not covering a team that's still in it, because the coaches are there, the GMs are there. You start to do your draft work, like you mentioned in the newsletter. And the Pro Bowl, everyone's like, why would you go to the Pro Bowl? I went to the Pro Bowl for a few years to cover because you're able to get players in a relaxed environment.
Yeah.
Number one, it's a few weeks after the season ended. I don't want to say, when I say they're happy to see you, that's probably an exaggeration. I can't imagine Jason Kelce went back to Kylie and was like, I got to see Zach today, right? But it's the type of, I've covered 2 Pro Bowls where Jason was there, and he's always great to talk to, but he was especially nice and helpful because you're a familiar face. It's not the grind of the season, right? It's a few weeks later. I mean, I've spent time with Fletcher Cox at Pro Bowls, at Darren Sproles, I'm trying to think. Evan Mathis, John Dornbos, Cody Parkey, Rick Lovato at the Pro Bowl. I'm trying to think of all my Pro Bowl interviews.
What a decade of special teams in Philadelphia.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of all my Pro Bowl interviews. Point being, like, it's a way to talk to these guys. It's actually, and you know this much better than me, but like the NBA All-Star Game is a huge media ordeal, right? I see like that media day before where those guys are surrounded.
You don't even go. I mean, it's just for national media and kind of, people that are looking for cheap, quick quotes. Like, your access is horrible there in terms of like actually talking to people.
But they're like on podiums and it's like a whole deal. MLB
there's
also,
international reporters too, and I mean, there's just, it's kind of like the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
There's people that are kind of asking non-hoops questions.
Sure.
I would just skip those. Yeah.
MLB All-Star Game's a big deal for the media, and I think the NHL All-Star Game is too. The Pro Bowl is not now. Ever since they moved from Hawaii, it's not. I think there are some reporters who like getting that Hawaii trip out of it. I remember one year. I'm not saying they did it. I grew up reading the Inquirer, and I'd see like this byline from Honolulu, and I'm like, man, I'm pretty jealous about that. But the NFL Pro Bowl doesn't get a lot of media, so it's a way to have good conversations with people. And I can tell you some like real good quality stories that I've gotten at the Pro Bowl because there weren't as many reporters there. I don't know what it's like now ever since they changed it from a game to like this week-long event, like you said. But where would you want to go if, let's say you're a player. Let's say you're, I don't know, are you Jason Kelce? Are you Jake Elliott? Are you Rick Lovato? Are you Fletcher Cox?
Let's say Rick Lovato.
Okay, you're Rick Lovato. Do you want to go to Hawaii? Do you want to go to Vegas? Do you want to go to Orlando?
I think I want to go to Hawaii once.
Okay.
I think Hawaii is like a once every 5 years type of thing. And then I think I'd rather go to Orlando. Unfortunately for you, because that's where the Super Bowl is this year, I'm not the biggest Vegas person.
Neither is Julia, yeah.
In the world. It's like, look, I've had some fun there. I've gone on...
you do Summer League there. It's scorching hot.
It's really hot, and it's just like... I don't know. I like Vegas, but it's a place for 2 days or so.
Okay, yeah.
And then
fair.
by day 3, I'm burned out, and it's funny. If you leave that Vegas airport on a Sunday night, which I don't know what you're leaving on a Friday.
We're leaving on a Friday. Yep.
That is an interesting place to see all the people who have been around in Vegas. So yeah, I think for Hawaii maybe once every 4 or 5 years. And then I think I would pick Orlando amongst those. I don't know. I just the easier trip. I don't know what you think of Orlando. Do you? There are a lot of. I have some friends who are adults who have gone to Disney World.
Okay.
And that's been
like without kids.
Yeah. Well,
really?
And not at my age, but let's say at like in their like young 20s.
Oh, interesting.
And I feel like that has been kind of a controversial subject amongst us. Like some people say that's absolutely ridiculous. But
what's the chat think? Is Disney World a place you can go without kids?
They say that there are places like, I don't know if it's, again, I don't really know Disney World that well, like whether it's Epcot or just some of the resorts there where, there are like bars and things like that. But I'm pretty sure these guys are actually like riding the rides during the day.
Okay.
So, my friends are interesting people, I guess.
Yeah, I went to Disney World a year and a half ago with my kids and my wife and my in-laws, and I will say that this can sound embarrassing, but I asked for like half hour to an hour to myself so I can go to the Hall of Presidents, if you're familiar with that. I wanted to see, I hadn't been there since I was a kid. I was like, I don't think at the time my son was 4. I'm like, I don't think he wants to go to the Hall of Presidents. My wife didn't want to go to the Hall of Presidents, so I'm like, you know what? You can hang out with the kids. You can eat they have these like big chicken legs. I'm gonna go to the Hall of Presidents, and that was fun. And I'll also say that when I walk into, I hope this is not the other media catching strays, okay? But when I walk into to the Eagles. Media house, and I'm walking in full of energy, and they're like, "Why are you so happy right now? Like why are you so energetic?" Well, when you go to Disney World, everyone there is like, it's the happiest place on earth, sure. Right? So so you fit right in when you're attacking it with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. But
I love that. You don't go on Space Mountain. You don't go on Splash Mountain. The Hall of Presidents.
I went to the Hall of Presidents by myself. That was, yeah, I did that. But I did the other stuff with my kids, but the Hall of Presidents I did on my own. Yeah, I guess if you're Jason Kelce and you get to go with your daughter, and your family, Disney World's the draw. I would think I don't know what Jalen Hurts thinks. I'm curious. Like, would Jalen Hurts rather be in Vegas? Would he rather be in Hawaii? Is he happy in Orlando? I'm not down there to ask.
Do you think he even notices it? This is just a location. This is,
yes.
I mean, I feel like Jalen would be like, this is a business trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though it's the Pro Bowl.
But to your point, and about it being a business trip, one thing that I hear from players, and I remember talking to Josh Sweat about this. If you want to turn it into a drinking game, I just mentioned Josh Sweat, so
sure.
So there you go. You can take a shot. If it's your first, if you're a young up and coming player and it's your first time there, there's something cool about being around the other great players, right? Sometimes you feel like, all right, I've made it. Sometimes you feel like I could soak this up. I mean, I think about the NBA All-Star Game where you see I was in watching The Last Dance and you see the locker room, how like Jordan's there and Kobe's there. It's pretty cool from that perspective. So now, I was going to say Jalen Hurts is surrounded by these top quarterbacks. A lot of them are kind of pulling out, like Gardner Minshew. No knock on Gardner Minshew, but Gardner Minshew's in the Pro Bowl this year, right? So it's not like you're surrounded by all of the best quarterbacks, but at some other positions, you're surrounded by elite players. So that's a good thing. And then the other thing too, and this brings back Darren Sproles. I remember when Darren Sproles was in it. This was 2000, and this was after the 2014 season, so going into 2015. It was before the Arizona I went out there for the Super Bowl in Arizona, but the Pro Bowl was in Arizona, so I was there for like a week and a half. Fun time in Arizona.
Arizona's not a bad place.
Yeah, especially this time of year. And so Darren Sproles, it was like such a sense of accomplishment because it was later on in his career, and he had worked so hard to get there. And I remember talking to Drew Brees, flex, but Drew Brees was like, he felt so good for Darren Sproles to be there, and I imagine it's the same way in the NBA. Like when you first make it, it's a sense of accomplishment.
Tyrese Maxey probably in a couple weeks here.
Yeah, good point.
Like he's going to get to play with LeBron and all of these people he looked up to. So definitely, I love Darren Sproles, by the way.
Oh yeah, Sproles is the man. Sproles is the man. Real quick though, with the Pro Bowl here, which event would you do best at? Here, I'm going to read some of these to you. Best catch, precision passing, closest to the pin, high stakes, which is the goal of this event is to catch the most footballs without dropping any. Okay, dodgeball, kick-tack-toe, which is each team's kicker competes in a giant tic-tac-toe competition. Snapshots, which is a long snapper and center have the chance to shine. You snap football into a target of various sizes. Then I said Madden, gridiron gauntlet, which is an obstacle course. Tug of war, which is standing above well, we all know tug of war.
You're going to define tug of war.
And then move the chains, which is offensive and defensive lineman strength competition that includes teams of 5 players collaborating to move 3,000 pounds of weight off a wall.
I don't think I would do well at anything that involved catching or throwing.
Okay.
I think people don't completely understand this, like just watching at home, because I certainly forget it, especially like as somebody who's been able to go to some like training camp practice flex as well. The footballs are so big in the NFL. They're like huge for the average person. The idea that these guys can both throw the ball 50 to 60 yards and that, somebody like Devontae Smith, who is just like not a very big person, makes these catches routinely. Like these balls are I mean, it's pretty impressive. Like it's not easy. I think kicking would probably be, I would do the best just compared to the average person off the street. I have never participated in the Eagles. Do they still do that? The kick competition?
They do not. Jimmy Kemsky and Elliott used to dominate it. Yeah. And Martin Frank was good at it too.
Yeah. So I think I would probably do a little bit better than. I'm not saying I would beat Jimmy or Elliott at it, but I think compared to the average person, anything that involved kicking, I think, I could probably do a little better.
What about dodgeball? I think you do well at dodgeball.
Yeah. Well, especially too if I'm playing against like other writers
okay.
too. Like, man,
Not if you're competing against NFL players. You don't.
No, I think I would do poorly. Okay. Yeah, I know. Breaking news. Yeah.
You know what I would like to see if they say if Roger calls me, Roger Goodell, we're on first name basis, right? If Roger Goodell calls me and says how can we improve this? I would say let's take it a step further. If you're not playing a game, let's stop doing these NFL skills things. Okay, let's see how these guys are in other sports. Let's have a 3-point shooting contest. Let's have a home run derby. Let's have I don't know if you can simulate a hockey thing, but let's have a soccer shot thing. Let's do tennis. Let's do golf, swimming, whatever it may be. Right? I would do that. And to that point, I hear you're a pretty good shooter.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can definitely do that well. And I don't move the same way I used to, but you don't forget how to like make a standstill wide open 3. So
unless you don't know how to do it, in which case,
unless you don't know, how to do it.
or you don't shoot.
Well, I listen to the pods.
Yes.
You're a facilitator.
Yes, exactly.
You do the little stuff.
I would get the ball to you.
Sure.
Okay. But I'm not shooting that 3. So that would be a good wrinkle too. And I say that because in the Eagles, in their auditorium, they have a basketball hoop, and those guys love it. Like, and Nick Sirianni always has these competitions. So that would be a good wrinkle to it.
Well, and I remember too, just watching Comcast Sportsnet, like in the, kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s, the Eagles, they used to do a charity basketball game.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And it used to crack me up seeing some of the linemen, like they're big boys,
Sure.
wearing the jerseys. And some of them are such good athletes that even at, close to 300 pounds, they were getting up for dunks and things like that. I remember T.O. was unbelievable in those games as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Derek Boyko used to be the coach, and there was always there was always debate about who the best Eagles basketball player was. But they did have a team, and they had jerseys and everything. And on this year's roster,
McNabb was probably the best, right? Or he was up there.
Yeah, he played at Syracuse. But they were, he was legit. There were a few others who could play. Jeremy Macklin, I think, could play. And on this year's team, I know Devontae plays. His favorite player was Rondo. And I can actually see, with those long arms, I can see a Rondo element to Devontae's game. But I am curious who the best would be. I mean, Jordan Mailata in the post. I don't know if Jordan Mailata has ever played basketball, but Jordan Mailata in the post would be tough to defend.
Yeah.
Anything else in the Pro Bowl?
No, I think we got a lot of Pro Bowl talk in there.
Okay. And again, that's begins today, and it's through this weekend. And the Eagles have 7 players down there: Landon Dickerson, Jalen Hurts, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, Hassan Reddick, Darius Slay, and DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is in his first one. Landon Dickerson, Jalen Hurts, and Hassan Reddick are going to their first Pro Bowls because they did not go last year, of course. Last thing, we have a few minutes here, and this was actually going to be the top topic today. Everyone's talking about the Super Bowl. And I look at these Super Bowl rosters, and I say, I think the Niners have a really good roster, and the Chiefs are who they are. We discussed that on Monday's show. But what jumps out to me is, A, I don't think this Chiefs team is as good as last year's Chiefs team. But B, I would take the 2022 Eagles over either of those teams. Is that me being too close to the 2022 Eagles, or do you feel the same way?
Well, especially because the Niners have not been very impressive. This is not an L. I know their fans, they always talk about, how impressive their regular season is and the DVOA. Yeah. And good for them. They made the Super Bowl, so it actually doesn't matter. It's just winning the games at this point. But the style points were not there in the Packers and the Lions games. I mean, frankly, I thought they got outplayed maybe in both of those games for long stretches.
Definitely.
I think I agree with you, Zach. Here is, again, we've talked about a lot of the basketball crossover topics today. In basketball, the general rule of thumb for like a Super Bowl, or obviously NBA Finals contender, is you got to have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. In football, and you can remind me if this is wrong, that's not always the case, right? Like the dominant offense, I feel like some of the Chiefs' defenses, some of the, I think like the Packers, the Patriots, like once in a while they snuck in with pretty bad defenses. That's right?
Yeah.
That the dominant offense can kind of supersede.
I think you have to be dominant on one side of the ball. Like, I don't think you have to be top 5 on both sides or top 10 on both sides, because I've heard that in the NBA as well. But I think in the NFL, if you have one side of the ball that's that's absolutely elite, then the other side, it can't be horrible, but even if it's middle of the pack, you can win games because of that one side.
Well, do you think too? I mean, I would say most times it has to be the elite offense too. Is there a recent example where it's kind of mediocre offense, incredible defense?
I mean, the 2000 Ravens, the 85 Bears.
We're getting back in the here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
The 85 Bears.
Sure. I mean, those are the ones that jump to mind. Some of those, you're probably right, because even the Patriots teams.
I'm just thinking over the last 10
in like
years.
the post Randy Moss era, those in the most recent Patriots teams, they still had Brady, right? That Patriots team that beat the Rams wasn't prolific, but they were a really good defensive team that year. They had, but they still had Brady. And no, it is true when you look at some of the great Super Bowl teams in recent years. I mean, the Ravens team that beat the Niners, when Flacco was elite,
Sure.
I think that was the 2012 season. That Ravens team was better defensively than they were offensively, I would say. I'm trying to go through this in my head, but those would be the ones that really jump out. Well, actually, here I would say the Legion of Boom Seahawks were better defensively than offensively, but they still had Russell Wilson and they still had Marshawn Lynch, and it's not as if they were a dynasty either. I mean, they came close.
Claire brings up that point. The Peyton title in Denver.
Yes, good point.
He was not very good at the end
when
of
they beat
that.
Carolina. Yeah,
That was pretty much all Von Miller in that defense.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I
Thanks,
remember,
Claire. Yeah, that's
and
good dropping.
I remember in the AFC Championship game, it was like a very kind of ugly game. They beat the Patriots at the end, but the Patriots had a shot, but it was ugly, low scoring, and like Jim Nantz would always be like, "Well, the sheriff can can he get the Broncos over the finish line?" And it was just funny because Peyton Manning, for his entire career, was probably the best quarterback in the league. I mean, Brady at different times too, but right up there. And he couldn't win a title. And then when he has like one of his worst seasons at the very end, he actually wins the Super Bowl.
It's funny how that does work. But like the Eagles, for instance, were favored over the Chiefs last year.
Yeah, I mean, they were top 5 on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and I think that this Chiefs team is inferior to last year's Chiefs team. I think, now the people in San Francisco might disagree, but I think last year's Eagles team would be favored over this year's Niners team.
I think so too.
So now Patrick Mahomes is still a buzzsaw, all right? But it is accurate to say that, or it is my opinion, at least, that the Eagles, if they could have had last year's team this year, then they would have won their second Lombardi.
I agree with you, Zach, because I think the Chiefs' offense was pretty dominant last year. And obviously I think their defense has improved, but I'm still more scared of the one elite unit. If you have to contend with that, I think that can be a pretty tough out in the playoffs. So when I look at the two teams, I would say the Niners feel more like last year's Eagles.
Yes.
Where they have the quarterback who's making nothing. They have the great group of skill players.
Good point.
They can run the ball pretty much at will. It seems like they are maximizing their quarterback's skill set. But I would say this year's Chiefs are kind of how the Eagles have to look at it moving forward. And that's really just a product of how much money the quarterback is making and roster building. You would know better than me, but it sure looks like, Andy and Brett Veach, it seems like they really killed the draft defensively for, I don't know, like a 2 or 3 year span there. Yeah. Like I was looking at their depth chart, and you see, I think I saw like 6 or 7 guys that were all drafted on defense from 2020 to 2022. It's like Snead, Willie Gay, McDuffie, Karlaftis.
Good point.
So it seems to me like that is how they're going to have to go about it moving forward. And, the other day I mentioned, can Vic Fangio be the Spags, the older defensive coordinator who kind of settles into a spot at the end of his career and gives the team a certain level of continuity and, gravitas on that side of the ball. It's not exactly the same, right? Like the Eagles clearly moving forward and next year especially, like they're going to spend a lot more at wide receiver than the Chiefs did. But I think that is generally the model. So, a lot of this is going to come down to Jalen.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when you do pay the quarterback, there is, I think it's a misnomer or an overstatement to suggest that when you pay the quarterback, you can't pay other spots, right? There's enough money go around. You just can't pay every spot. So you need to decide where you're not paying. And at those spots you're not paying, you need to be exceptional at drafting and developing. And to your point, the Chiefs have done a really good job in recent years of drafting some of those spots on defense where they're not paying. Cornerback is an example of that. They haven't done as well drafting wide receiver, although Rashid Rice, Philly guy, is looking good this year, and he's going to continue developing. But they've really put their money in Andy Reid fashion, and similar to the Eagles, in their offensive and defensive lines, right? They're paying offensive linemen in free agency. I mean, they paid Joe Thuney, right? They paid Jawan Taylor. They're committed to paying top dollar at those spots, and that's where they're investing their second contract, third player, a second contract, third contract guys. And the Eagles, similarly, the Eagles are paying their wide receivers, right? They're paying their edge rushers right now. Their defensive tackles, they won't necessarily have to pay because they're on rookie deals, but eventually they're paying their offensive line. They're paying corners right now, but you're going to see that start to change as in Hurts' second contract. When you get the Bradbury and Slay deals off your books, you're going to have to develop. You're going to have to rely on Keely Ringo, and I don't want to throw Eli Ricks in there now, and maybe the Eagles draft a corner in the second round, but you're going to have to really draft and develop well, and that's what the Chiefs have done in this Mahomes contract era.
Totally, and the Eagles are still going to spend on the lines.
Mm-hmm.
That's clear that they are going to do that. But regardless of how many resources they spend now, I think this season showed that there is a base level of spending and resource allocation you need to put to the back seven.
Sure.
And I'm not sure the Eagles met that this season. But some of it is, the 49ers, they drafted Fred Warner in the third round.
Yep. Yeah. Good point.
The Eagles have spent a couple third round picks at linebacker.
Yeah, Davion Taylor did not work out.
And the Kobe Dean, we will see. But certainly not the Fred Warner type impact. Yeah, but I think the way you put it is kind of how we should look at it, where there are going to be some spots where they're able to spend in free agency. They're able to retain players. But those other spots, I think you need to do a great job of drafting and maybe consider drafting higher in those spots and then developing as well. So, I agree with you. These are two fairly flawed teams, though. The Chiefs' defense, the one difference between last year is the Chiefs' defense feels like a much better unit.
Yeah.
And I think the Chiefs' defense, give them credit. Against the Eagles last year, they didn't really stop them. They had the one fluke play where they scored the touchdown, and that was obviously key in that game. But it did feel like in the second half, even if they weren't stopping the Eagles, they did at the end. It was much harder for the Eagles to drive down. That's what kind of made Jalen Hurts' performance more impressive, because Spags he didn't figure out the Eagles' offense, but he was making them work in a way that Johnny Gans and the Eagles' defense was just not doing with Mahomes by the end of that game.
So this is your last show before the Super Bowl with us. Do you have a Super Bowl pick, or do we have to wait for the newsletter next week to find out?
I think I'm leaning towards the Chiefs. I just
because
think,
of Mahomes?
Yeah, I think just because of Mahomes and Reid. And look, I've seen them now in 2 playoff games against 2 pretty good teams. Besides their great talent level and Mahomes just being great, it just feels like they're not fazed by this. And the Niners, I don't know. They feel a little more rickety. I have not been quite as impressed by. In the regular season, I was super impressed by them. They would just win, 35-21 every week, and it would just be very easy. And Purdy would score on 6 of his 10 drives or 9 drives. But I just haven't been quite as impressed by them. So I think I am leaning towards the Chiefs, which I think they are underdogs right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm a little surprised by that.
Because of Mahomes, because of the history, yeah. I
Even
agree.
last year, I know the Eagles were probably better than this 49ers team, but I'm still a little surprised that the public and Vegas and all the books have settled on, the Niners are actually a little bit better heading into the game. I'm a little surprised by that.
Yeah, typically if you don't have the best quarterback or the better quarterback in the Super Bowl, you need to have the mismatch on the lines of scrimmage. And I'm not certain that the way the 49ers are playing gives them that mismatch. Personnel-wise, they're outstanding on the defensive front.
But they have not been playing that
Exactly. And then offensive line, I mean, they have perhaps the best left tackle in football in Trent Williams, but I don't know if I necessarily give them a huge edge there. So I remember, back in 2017, or more specifically February 2018, when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, I kept saying, it's Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. And then as I was talking to people and as the week got closer and I kind of, was hearing from the Eagles about the matchups, I'm like, this is going to be about the lines of scrimmage, right? And the offensive line played outstanding that game, and the Eagles ended up winning, and Nick Foles played out of his mind, right? Maybe Brock Purdy plays out of his mind, but I have a hard time picking against Mahomes.
I'm with you. In that Super Bowl, I know that the Patriots' offensive line played probably above their heads in that game. Obviously, they give up the big play to BG at the end.
Yep.
But yeah, like the time when you would go against the quarterback coach duo would be, okay, this team is just going to kill them on the lines. It's kind of what Tampa did to KC in that Super Bowl too.
Yep.
Remember, Mahomes was running for his life the entire game. I don't really see that here. I don't really like how the Niners are playing, and I obviously hope that's the case. I think I am begrudgingly rooting for the Chiefs to win here, just because I don't know. It's the lesser of two evils, and
sure,
Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid winning another Super Bowl, at the very least, it makes sense. Like, it's like, okay, makes sense. Best quarterback, probably the best coach right now. But I don't see that mismatch on the lines.
You can read all of Rich's Super Bowl coverage in the newsletter. Make sure you subscribe. It's free, and it's the best newsletter in Philly. And you can listen and read to all our Super Bowl coverage live from Vegas next week. Like Rich said, Julia, Bo, and I are heading there on Sunday night. We'll be on Radio Row Monday morning and throughout next week, noon Eastern time, so 9 local time. And we're still putting together a roster of guests, but you're going to want to tune in, and we're excited to be out there. Bo is going to be back tomorrow from Mobile. You can check out all Bo's Senior Bowl coverage, and we have a special guest tomorrow. Tune in. It's going to be a guest you're going to want to listen to and enjoy. Yeah, it's not Professor Shulman. That's a great guest. This is a different guest, and one that I promise you'll enjoy. So until then, Rich, thanks for joining us today. Bo will want me to tell you that we love you. I will say, as Tony Kornheiser says, we'll be better tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.
We all silly like the mayor.